right, we're looking pretty good. Let me give it a couple minutes to make sure everybody gets signed on. Sorry for being late, everybody. All right. Set up. All right. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. Today is the third Thursday of the month, which means we are in advanced cameras today. For those of you who are new and have not joined or done one of these before, my name is Saxon. I am the camera teacher or the camera class teacher. Every Thursday from 5:30 to 7, we do a different camera class to educate users on camera functions and operations and just kind of general camera knowledge. For those of you who were here the first week, we talked about the entry to photography, which is really just using the camera's automatic features to take a photo, pointing, shooting, and very basic information. Last week was our our intermediate camera class. The intermediate camera class was meant to be kind of an entry or a starting point for those of you getting into photography on how to do manual control. There we got away from automatic. We learned about using different lenses, getting away from the auto features and doing things like manually adjusting aperture, shutter, ISO, those types of things. In today's class, the advanced photography, we're no longer talking about any of those features. So instead of talking about things like shooting, how to use the camera manually, instead we're going to get into more advanced things, which to me is actually the art behind taking the photo. Today we're going to look at things like how to manipulate the camera and pose, as well too as how to edit our photos. We're going to end the class talking about advanced accessories, and then that'll be the end for that. For those of you watching at home, please feel free to chat and add any questions that you have in the comments. I'll read them aloud. And for anybody in person, you can interrupt me at any point in time. So let's start with some simple tips for taking great photos. Now I want everyone to know that we're taking two subjects in this case. There are so many things that we can talk about in the world of photography as far as taking good photos. There are classes dedicated to this where they teach all semester long on how to shoot a camera and good tips and tricks. That being said, though, we're going to look at two things that I find my customer base or the store's customer base coming and asking the most about. We're going to look at portrait photography and we're going to look at landscape photography. Both of these, in its fundamental purposes, can be used for other things. Landscape photography also works for architecture. Portrait photography works for taking pictures of any object, of anything that you have in mind, not just people. So, let's start with portrait photography. Portrait photography, from the name, is all about capturing the portrait, capturing people. There are tons of ways for us to take regular, everyday, candid photos of different types of subjects in the world. When it comes to portrait photography, though, our main goal, objectively, is to get a good, clean, and fine photo of the person that is in front of us. Whether it's meant to be serious, funny, happy, sad, ominous, foreboding, whatever it might be, we want to capture that as simple and as effectively as possible. One of the simplest tricks in today's photography world when it comes to portrait photography is filling the frame. Taking a picture of somebody and getting rid of all negative or excess space. And we can see it clearly in this one. On the left-hand side, we have the portrait by itself. There's molding on the wall. We have drop shadow. We kind of have all this extra filler that doesn't need to be in the actual image. Move over to the right-hand side, and we have a perfect clean portrait. Just the subject itself, so just the person. It's a simple thing, but cleaning up and filling the frame really does wonders for portrait photography and brings it into a more professionalistic or a professionalism sense. Within photography, there are all of these different shapes, and they're photography tools or ways that you can look at your frame when shooting. One of the most simplistic forms is called the rule of thirds, which I'll break down in a little bit. But in order to achieve that, we look at the photo in a grid-like pattern. 9 sections, or 3 different sections going top, bottom, and middle, or right, left, and center. If we can keep the eyes in the top third of the portrait, it is naturally going to look as more professional of an image. Humans naturally have their eyes in the top portion of their face or of their head. Therefore, keeping the eyes in the top third of the image is a natural indicator and a movement path for people who are viewing your photo. Most people will start by looking at the eyes. From there, you might look at the color that she has for her lipstick. You might look at the frills of the dress, the bracelet, all sorts of different things. But by starting with the eyes in the top third of the photo, it's a natural locking point for then us to move around the photo and see other things. If it doesn't work that way for the eyes, getting the eyebrows in the top third, eyes or eyebrows, will also lead to an effective photo. And we're relying heavily on the eyes, but there is something to be said about that. The eyes are the biggest thing to focus on when it comes to portraits. And you might be asking why. There are other things happening within the portrait. And from our first class, when we talk about shooting through the image, this really isn't that, since we're only focused on one thing. If anybody had a film camera back in the day or remembers the disposable cameras, you might remember the red eye. When you take a picture of someone, the eye would get red or blurry or kind of look a vampire-like. That was partly due to flash, partly due to the camera's inability to focus, but there were a lot of reasons that something like that would happen. In today's modern DSLR and mirrorless world, most cameras have eye tracking technology, where when you focus it on a subject matter, a box or boxes will appear on the portrait's eyes. The reason being is that by focusing in on the eye, you're reducing the movement or blur of other things. You're also locking into whatever it is that you're taking a portrait of. The eye, as a joke, usually is the gateway to the soul, as a lot of people like to say or jokingly express. However, in photography, the eye is such an easy thing to lock on when it comes to portrait photography. And I'd strongly recommend that if you have that eye technology, eye recognition technology in your camera, you do turn that on and utilize it. It's a very great tool for portraits for both humans and animals alike. Not every human, though, is an adult. A lot of humans could be small, could be tiny. Therefore, our mentality of getting or taking a photo and keeping them in the top third might change. It's important that then we remember the getting on their level. When it comes to children or shorter people, we want to make sure that instead of shooting down at our subject matter, that we get on the same level as they are. We look at this image, and I would say this is a great picture of a candid birthday party. Looks like the little brother is biting the sister. People have got glasses and streamers and all this goofy stuff. There's a cake in the center, bubbles everywhere. Very fun, looks silly, probably a great photo that you'd show your kids 10, 15 years from now. But if you could take the time and use your digital camera more as a tool and less as something to just record an event, then you could get something more like this. By dropping down, keeping eyes in the top third, and utilizing manual control like we talked about last week. In this case, I probably would say this is a 4 aperture, maybe a 5.6. The background is blurred out, yet our boy in the front is our main subject matter. ISO is probably somewhere around 200 to 400. And the shutter speed is probably 1/60th of a second, maybe a little bit faster than that, 1/80th of a second. But it really doesn't have to be too quick because they're probably not moving that fast or at all. This now is the actual rule of thirds. So again, I talked a little bit about it before with the boxes and the separation on the photo. But now if you look in this picture, you can see there are interlocking circles. Those circles are going to be where our squares are meeting. This is going to be the containment of the rule of thirds. Where the red circles are, if you can place your subject matter, you start to create a more visually stimulating and interesting photo by doing that. Some examples. Here we have the surfer. On the one end, we can see that he's hitting the top right part of our rule of thirds, and his shadow is hitting the bottom part. From there, then, we have a beautiful picture, great sunset that's happening. The water is almost perfectly aligned with the horizon line. There is a nice shine that comes off the wet sand. It just looks like an altogether good picture. Here we have something similar. On the left-hand side, you have the girl, her shoulder's hitting, her ankle is hitting. The water is sitting at that top part of the rule of thirds at the horizon line. There's a little bit of seaweed on the ground, a little bit of slickness, but the color, the black and white, really makes this look a little foreboding, ominous as a storm clears or comes over the horizon. It's kind of cool. Has a little bit of drama to it, and definitely shows off a really nice use of the rule of thirds. A simple one, but for those who are taking pictures of people for clients or for photo shoots, this might be a good option as well too, utilizing the rule of thirds. Mom and dad are in the background, brother and sister are in the foreground. Both are hitting their sides properly, and it overall just looks really nice and clean. And lastly, Jim. So this is to show you that not only within our photography world are people utilizing the rule of thirds, but even in pop culture and media, you're seeing that. And the news or the office are a great example. By doing this and not removing the excess negative space, you're putting Jim in a space. In this case, it's the office. And in this case, it's the conference room where we can see the plant and then the shades on the one side. Might not be much, but this is a nice indication of where Jim's located in the office. And if you're a fan of the show, you might recognize that almost immediately. Jim's eyebrows are at the top third of the rule of thirds, and he's hitting clearly in those spots. So naturally, a visually stimulating or pleasing photo hits all the right notes, and it's just a simple, easy way of utilizing portrait photography techniques in your everyday world. Now let's move into landscape. Landscape is important because of something called the horizon line. I mentioned that on the last few slides, but the horizon line is the meeting place of the sky and water. In this case, the mountains and the sky are a part of our background, and our foreground is the water. So the horizon line is the line at which those two are meeting. If you can find your horizon line, it's a really important and easy technique to use in photos because you can center your photo, you can off-center it, you can make it more dramatic, more moody, all based on where your horizon line is placed within your portrait or within your picture. Here you can see that it's a little bit lower than the center of the image, but by doing that you have this beautiful large sky that then also gets mimicked and played with on the very bottom of the image where you see snow along the water bank. Landscape, though, is not only just about the horizon line, it's also about balance and symmetry. Finding ways to create harmony within nature where there might not necessarily be harmony. The way you have to think about this is that within photography, There are going to be areas that might not necessarily achieve probably the most beautiful aspect of what you're looking for, or maybe the most, maybe not the mood or the angle that you're looking for. In this case, by going and finding the balance and finding symmetry within your landscape or nature photo, you can naturally create a little bit of sense of order within the chaos. And I think this photo is a little bit more dramatized than you would expect, but similar boat. The symmetry and the balance is coming from the rows of lavender as they all point towards the tree and the horizon line. You have a little bit of chaos that's happening too with the thunder and the lightning, but it looks really cool and really flashy and interesting. The balance is coming from the fact that the lavender is all leading us in the symmetrical pattern towards our tree. Our tree is perfectly placed in the middle, it's balanced, and then around it is the natural chaos of landscape photography, of things that might be a little bit more interesting or exciting. Same idea. Trees in the center of the pond, you've got mountains from either side. The mountains are symmetrical, they mimic each other, there's balance with it, and the water's reflection of the horizon line really brings that symmetry and balance further. Lastly, I like this photo. It's not my personal favorite, but it shows off, I think, the balance and symmetry in a really easy to see way. The yellow line cutting through this image is the balance, is the symmetry of the picture. A simple one, but opening up yourself to sunlight. Light is always going to be one of your best friends. It's something I don't talk about a lot in the advanced or the intermediate and the intro class. And the only reason that I don't talk about it that much is because I truly believe that it's something that you will learn as you go. Sunlight becomes a more advanced technique in photography because if you can learn to read light well, then you can learn how to manipulate light well. And by manipulating light, you're able to make your photos pop a little bit more. More light is better than less light. We can always make the camera less susceptible to light, but it's hard to make something that's dark look light. In this case, the bad image, the sun is on his back, he's not opening his body up to it, blocking his face with the fish and the rod, but in the better image, we've shifted. We've opened up our shoulders a little bit, we've turned our ISO up, and using the fish's naturally slimy and shiny texture, we're able to illuminate the inside of this gentleman a little bit more, where you can now see the face and the shirt and the color. It pops more, it catches more, all because instead of keeping the sun directly on your back, you're opened more to the sun. Not enough where it ruins the photo, but enough that you can actually see what's happening in the image. Now, let's talk about the difference between JPEG and RAW, and why does that matter to someone like you? So a standard RAW photo, as you can see in this picture, is a washed out, light, doesn't look like a detailed image. JPEG, on the other side, has more information, more detail, and you can see the color difference right off the bat between the RAW and the JPEG. But if we look at processed RAW and we compare that to the JPEG, the processed RAW is phenomenal. The color pops, the shadows are good, there's more of a rosy color in the gentleman's skin, the guitar strap has more color and character and texture to it, same as the shirt. These are going to be some of the things that can happen when you process a raw image and you go through and edit your photos. These are the questions, though, that I like to make sure you're asking yourself before you're doing any of these. And that's the JPEG versus RAW debate. The first question I ask customers is, are you planning or are you interested in editing your photos? Most people, I would say, are hit or miss. They want the option, but they don't necessarily want to do it right away. So in that case, I tell them that you always are able to change it but it's important to set it up the way that you want it to be for the first time. JPEG is the most standard and common form of saving your photos. It's a compressed file, meaning that it's a smaller file size, somewhere between 2 to 6 megabytes. The color bit's low, about 8-bit, which means that it really doesn't take a lot to edit this photo. It can be edited with any photo editor, and it can be transferred much faster than most other PNG files, PDF, or RAW format can. Now, if you are interested in editing your photos, then you want to go with the RAW side of things. RAW is an uncompressed file, meaning that it's a larger file size. On a low end, 12 to 16 megabytes. On some higher end with 60 megapixel cameras, you're looking probably closer to 30 to almost 40 megabytes per photo. That being said, they have higher color bits, 12 to 16 bit. And they can be edited as a RAW on some editing softwares. But you'll most likely have to convert this into another file. Again, what's the idea behind that? If you're using things like Photoshop, InDesign, Lightroom, those are all capable of editing a RAW photo. If you're on your computer's free editor that it has, or you bought, or you're using a free service, most likely you will not be able to edit RAW photos on there, and you should look at upgrading. For the standard person, for the mom and dad trying to just take nice photos of their kids, JPEG is more than enough. For the person looking to become the next big photographer, to become as advanced as possible, to work on editing your photos, what I consider to be the 20% battle of your photography journey, then I think RAW would be a good option for you, and I would highly recommend trying it out and editing some of those photos after you've shot. Now that we've gotten the boring stuff out of the way, let's talk about the basics of editing photos. I like to tell customers and to people in general, if your photo is 100%, I would say 80% of your photo is what comes out of your camera. 20% is the editing process of which you take and you play with the photo and manipulate colors and all other things. I like this image or these images because these are good examples of why we might want to edit our photo. Color is always something to do with it. Having the ability to make your color pop or look brighter or dimmer is an important aspect for making symmetry and balance between your color and your profile. Making things too light or too dark, you have the ability to fix that. With the portrait on the bottom, it looks like a school photo or a headshot for some sort of recruitment or for LinkedIn. And I think this is a great example of showing off how it can manipulate your color, especially when it comes to her hair. You can see the highlights so much more apparently as you go through the different images. You can also see how her eyes pop a little bit more, her smile, her skin. There's a lot more radiating on the photo as you edit and change things to make it look clean and perfect. And then lastly, you have the baby, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The professional edit shows off less darkness, shows off less wrinkles, and just makes overall the baby look cuter and softer. Here are some editing softwares that will accept RAW formats. And I also want to make sure that you guys understand that if you're not shooting in RAW, but you'd still like to edit your photos, you can absolutely edit a JPEG. You're just going to be limited on what you can use, how much you're able to physically manipulate, and what you can and can't change. These are all great editors if you're looking to spend some money, pick up a product that works the best for you. I would strongly recommend all 4 of these. Take a look online, do some research, see what your favorite professionals are using, and that's where I would make my opinion and formulate this off of. So let's go step by step through my editing process. I will remind you guys that there will get a point where I will stop and I'll tell you what I will do next. But for right now, let's just start. Cropping and cleaning your image. Start by straightening the alignment of the photo. After that, go through and make sure that you have that you do not have any excess negative or dead space. Spot cleaning should also occur at this time. Adjusting white balance. White balance doesn't refer to exposure. Rather, it refers to the color of your overall composition. You will have less to play with when shooting in standard JPEG versus RAW, like I talked about earlier. But some editors will have presets that you can control and change, and others will have temperature and tint. Others will have both. This is a nice little example of what those menu or what they could look like. Again, you might have what's called LUTs, which are program inputs that you can change and update. You might also have the ability to change your temperature and tint via a scale. All editors are a little different though on how they use their programming. And if at any point I'm going too fast, please interrupt me. I'll slow down or I'll answer any questions that you guys have. Exposure and contrast. Exposure plays on the brightness and the darkness of a photo. Beware of making a photo too bright because you can get a muted or muddled look to your photo. On the flip side, contrast plays with dark and light tones. High contrast makes the image stark with very dark and light sections. Low contrast will make things look flat or washed out. Your goal in all of these is to aim for the middle. Find what looks best for the image. Don't be afraid to take a scale and jump all the way from one side to the other. Especially if you want to see how these tools are manipulating your photo. We can always go back, but you'll never know unless you try. This balance, though, between exposure and contrast is important because it plays with lights and darks. Lights and darks can be viewed on a camera without even looking at the image through what we call a histogram. A histogram isn't always needed. Some people don't like it at all, some people love it, but a histogram is a great way to see how light is being distributed throughout the image. This is typically what your perfect histogram would look like. Highlights would be extremely low. Highlights are your finishing piece or part of your image. That's what gives it the shine or the glow. Midtone should be the entire battle. Color and the balance of light and dark should basically rely heavily on the midtone section. And shadow should then come in second. They're your darkest parts. They're what give the highlights a pop, and they're what gives the midtones their drama or their mood. Now this is where histograms can be great, and they can also kind of suck. It's something like this. You can clearly see on the left-hand side the histogram at work and how it shows you exposed, properly exposed, underexposed, and overexposed. But now again, it's a tool, it's a learning piece. It's something you can use in your camera arsenal to understand light and distribution of light throughout your images or image. However, you can see that on the right-hand side, those four pictures clearly show that histograms don't technically matter. That lighting or the distribution of light can go any way, in any way, shape, or form. However, you can see that these images all look great in their own respect. And their histograms don't line up naturally with how we see and know histograms today. Once we play with the dark and light tones, it's now time to play with color. Color gets changed in what we call vibrancy and saturation, where the other is exposure and contrast. We're now talking about the vibrancy of the color and that saturation. So vibrancy is only going to increase or decrease the color intensity in the brighter of your colors throughout the image. You can kind of see that with the image on the right-hand side. Whereas saturation will increase or decrease color throughout the whole image evenly. And it doesn't just rely on the bright colors, it relies on all the colors. And you can see that clearly on the bottom image. Now once I hit this stage, this is where the last step comes into play. However, what I like to tell everybody during this process is that you should not do this part until you're exceptionally happy with your photo that you have. If, let's say, you've just gotten to the point of vibrancy and saturation and you still don't see it, this is where I recommend go back. Take a look and figure out what part of it you don't like. Maybe it's the exposure. Maybe you didn't crop it enough. Maybe you see a new spot that appeared. Maybe there's another editing tool that you want to start to use and manipulate while you're in this image. Now is the time to do it. Because after that step, now we get into then the sharpness. It's the final step. It's the last thing you do. This will then bring out definition and depth of field within your image. You got to be careful though, because too much is going to create a halo effect around the image, and it'll just kind of look like a white ghost is radiating off of whatever the image that you have is. The last thing is to print or display your images. I have this conversation with a lot of people. A lot of people aim to take photos and then they live on their laptop or their cell phone. They never see the light of day. I might recommend print your images out. Take pride in what you do. Take pride in this camera equipment and this gear that you got. There's books that you can get made up as well too. But I do like the idea of framing your images and putting them all over your walls. If that's still not something that you're interested in, then I also think picture frames that are digital are great because they have unlimited photo storage. There's so many things you can do with them. And they're fantastic products as well too. Easy to use. There's an app you download. Now, photography is a very important thing, and it's the main reason that we teach this class here right now. However, I do like to bring this up. Photography, as cool and as important as it does face its difficulties, especially when it comes to video. Video in itself is becoming more and more popular. More and more businesses and people who are running business or social media are learning the power of a quick 7 to 7-second video to a 20-minute video, and they're finding ways of creating content for whatever their brand is. If you are someone who falls into this category, you're looking to get started and you need a place to start, my first recommendation is the planning process, which is broken down into 3 parts: pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production are the initial steps. This is where you begin to make your project and write things down. What materials do you need? What items are you needing to this to be done? What are you filming? What's the script? Who's in it? What's the location? What time of day? Where? When? The 5 W's go into it. Who, what, where, when, why? That is where you get all the hammering out of your idea, of your vision, onto paper or onto a document for you to then use to set up for production. And that's the main phase of you capturing these clips or these films to work and to get what you need done. Once all of that's complete, now it's just left to put it together, which is post-production. And that's where you're going to work on creating your final piece to show, present, or air. When you're recording, there's 3 main important things you should be thinking about: video resolution, the ratios, and the frames per second. Video resolution should be pretty self-explanatory, but again, it's the quality of video that you're using. Most TVs that you see nowadays are in 4K. HD still does exist. I would then say that standard definition is kind of your entry level, the beginner. And then 8K is out there, but most TVs, nobody really has 8K. The TVs are built for 8K. If you're shooting on a camera that has 8K and you play it on one of those TVs, you will see it in that quality. But if you are shooting in 4K, playing this on an 8K TV, it's still showing 4K, but it upgrades it to make it look a little nicer because you're on the 8K TV. Ratios is another one. It's a little silly, but it's the sensor size. How much of the sensor is being used to record or to shoot video? 1:1, if you're an influencer or an online person looking to express, is usually a good one because that puts it in the 1:1 square that you're used to with like an Instagram or a Facebook. Lastly, frames per second. This is another one that I think is really important. But frames per second is how many frames in a second to capture an image. When you watch things like the news, they're using 12 frames a second. And when you watch your favorite John Wick movie or Avengers movie, a lot of the times they're using 120 frames a second so they can do slow motion. Depending on where you're at, the more frames you have, the slower you can run your film. The less frames that you have, the faster that you need to run your film. And the way that you think about this is that each of those stacks of green squares is a picture. A movie, a film, is a series of pictures that have slight motion in each image that when played at a speed and at a certain progression show a film, show a movie, show people moving. That's what you're seeing with frames per second, and that's why that matters. There's a very famous image or a video of one of the first ever video that was made of a horse running through a finish line. And it is about 12 frames within 1 second of a horse running through the finish line and this camera capturing that motion. When you look at it, it is just individual pictures of that horse as it's running, and that's all you're seeing. Now, I tell people all the time that there are 3 things that you must be focusing on and paying attention for when it comes to to filming, to making video or any content. Camera quality, lighting, and audio quality are the 3 most important aspects of what you're doing. Camera quality doesn't necessarily mean you're buying the nicest camera, but depending on what you're doing, you have an appropriate camera and equipment for what it is you're trying to accomplish. You're not going to bring a telephoto lens to shoot portraits unless the person is, 300 feet away. In the same side of it though, you're not going to bring a wide angle to take videos of nature unless you're trying to get the whole shot. You figure out kind of what gear is needed to accomplish what it is you're doing. Lighting, choose a lighting method that works best for you. We're going to show some of those. And audio quality, picking a microphone that picks up sound. If you can have these 3 pieces and the quality or just the good cadence that these 3 carry, then you will naturally create a more stimulating and nice looking video. This is one example of perfect lighting. This is studio lighting. If you were to be doing this, this is a great example of something that a lot of people do at their home. You don't necessarily need these giant lights to do that. You can get away by using lamps or light blocks or any sorts of thing that you might have. But this setup shows 3 lights that clearly show off the subject and bring more attention and detail out. The key light is the main light. The fill light takes away what the key light couldn't get, and then the backlight cleans up the rest. If something like this isn't achievable for your use, other lighting methods that I like, camera flashes are excellent accessories to pick up if you need one. Light blocks or LED lights are great. And during COVID, especially for videographers and people making video, ring lights became more and more popular. If we look at microphones, it's important to remember that your camera does have an in-camera mic. However, much like TVs have speakers in there, that doesn't mean the speakers are good quality. Get yourself a good microphone. On-camera mics exist, wireless mics, lavalier mics, and boom mics for those who are doing big productions are out there. Find a microphone that works best for your setup and gives you the best quality you need. Now, to stabilize your shot, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. I've broken it down into the most important categories that I see customers looking at. When we start with your standard tripods, or sticks, if you will. Because a monopod is technically one leg, it's not a tripod. But a monopod's great for lightweight, easy carrying, for hiking or backpacking. Tripods like a still photo, ball head joint, or a video tripod get their names based on what they like to do. Video obviously is better for video, with the pan, tilt, and roll. whereas ball head tripods stay still and firm a lot better and more easily. However, this might still not be enough for you. So things like gimbals are also extremely important. Single-handed gimbals, two-handed gimbal, a gimbal vest or stabilizer vest might be a good one as well too. I can't say I see a lot of people using the body gimbals, but single-handed gimbals and two-handed gimbals work really well, and I do see people utilizing those, especially for smaller shoots or mid-size shoots. And that's all I have for you guys. This class is typically a little bit faster. You guys didn't have many questions for me either. So I'll wait around a few more minutes. If you guys have any more questions, comments, or concerns, please chat away. I will be here to answer those for you. But just as a heads up, next Thursday is Christmas. So we will not be having our camera class next Thursday. As a friendly reminder to everybody, our next camera class will be this upcoming Monday, the 22nd. Where we'll be doing the Beyond the Traditional cameras. For those of you who have never taken one of those classes before, Beyond the Traditional camera is simple. We're going to be talking about things like drones, action cameras, GoPros, Insta360 cameras, and camcorders. Products that aren't necessarily your mirrorless or DSLR camera, but they can add to your camera arsenal so you can take exceptional pictures with different views, with more power, with waterproofing, and with more video-centric or customizable controls. So we'll talk about that all next week, this upcoming Monday, the 22nd. I'll give you guys a little bit of time. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, now is your time to ask. right. Well, it doesn't look like you guys have any more questions for me, so I will end the class there. Thank you, as always, everybody, for joining. I appreciate having you guys here. My name is Saxon. I teach the camera class every Thursday from 5:30 to 7. Reminder that this upcoming Thursday is Christmas, so our class will be on the 22nd, this Monday, for Beyond the Traditional Camera. Everybody have a great weekend. Stay healthy and happy. Keep shooting as always, and I'll see everybody Monday for our final class.